Hey there! Did you know Kroger always gives you savings and rewards on top of our lower-than-low prices? And when you download the Kroger app, you'll enjoy over $500 in savings every week with digital coupons. And don't forget fuel points to help you save up to $1 per gallon at the pump. Want to save even more? With a Boost membership, you'll get double fuel points and free delivery. So shop and save big at Kroger today. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Savings may vary by state. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
Jake Knapp is the inventor of the design sprint and the New York Times bestselling author of the book Sprint. He's also the co-founder of Character, a venture fund for early stage startups. How and why did you start using Miro?
I came from this position of thinking, I don't want to be doing stuff online, to thinking now when I do a sprint in person with a company, it's like, we're going to use Miro, even though we're all in the same room, because that's a better way for us to get this work done. As an investor, we're basically investing in their ability to solve problems. We're saying, we think this group of people is going to be able to solve a problem in a really great way and create value by doing it. And actually, you need to give people the tools that can help them make decisions, help them collaborate, help them visualize and see things in a different way. And Miro does all those things. So to me, at least as an investor, I'm thinking, give the team the tools that are going to help them think, that are going to make the most, brighten their skills as smart folks. And Miro is at the top of that list.
Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AEye Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our Quick Publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AEye Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AEye Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello and welcome to AEye Scouted on Anfield Index Pro. I'm Dave Hendrick, joined as always by Mr. Karl Matchett. How are you, sir?
Solid 7 out of 10. How are you on this fine international break?
I'm not bad, not bad. The week did not start well, but it is ending well, so that's a good thing. Right, news happened. Richard Hughes will be our new sporting director beginning, I think, June 1st.
Yep.
Joining from Bournemouth, where he has been technical director for the better part of a decade, if not a little bit more. Obviously a solid player back in the day. Played for Arsenal for a while in their academy, played for Bournemouth, played for Portsmouth, finished off at Bournemouth, and then became their technical director while Eddie Howe, he started off in the recruitment team and then became technical director under the watchful eye of Eddie Howe. And he has been, I don't know if sidelined is the right word, but he certainly hasn't been as involved since the new owners at Bournemouth came in, and that's apparently what led to him to hand in his resignation. Now, unlike other prominent sporting and technical directors, when he handed in his resignation, it wasn't like a thing of, oh, I'm leaving now, I've got another job lined up, and a period of gardening leave. He's actually worked his notice, and he's worked the whole season for them, and will continue to do so until the end of this campaign. I don't know that he would have been high on anybody's list pre-Michael Edwards' return, but once Edwards was announced, it became quite obvious that Richard Hughes was the one that was going to come in.
Yeah, I think he was initially sort of thought about as a Dan Ashworth replacement at Newcastle, because, as you mentioned, he worked with Eddie Howe for quite a long time. So there's, again, an obvious link up there. I mean, it does feel a little bit as though that's, from one connection to another, which is, I'm not going to say a concern, but in general, you don't really like to hear about just people jobs through connections and so on. But everybody does speak highly about him, as you would expect when he's been appointed to a new job and so on. So I think we can have a certain amount of trust in the people who have decided to bring him in. Obviously, we've spoken about Bournemouth in terms of their recruitment over the last few years previously on the podcasts. Exactly how much influence he has on all the decisions or the decision making or the conclusions of transfers is quite difficult to ascertain, not just because there's no exact fixed point where he's had the technical director role, but also, like you say, there's been a takeover in that point, and it's not a specific, shall we say, sporting director role or head of recruitment role. It is a bit of a vaguer title from Bournemouth, so a little bit difficult to judge, but certainly I think there's room for optimism anyway. And we definitely needed a new structure within Liverpool. So again, that's an important part of
it. See, that's the thing. Like, it's a difficult one to judge how much impact he's had on recruitment there. Obviously, the Liverpool press want to hype this up. This is the new sporting director. So they're pointing at this deal and that deal and another deal and saying, oh, look at the good work he did. And then they're also mentioning, well, there was also these couple of bad transfers. But the issue is, when he was working there with Eddie Howe, given what we've seen of Eddie Howe at Newcastle, how much impact is he likely to have really had? Like, how many of those signings were actually his and not just Eddie Howe leading the charge on them? And speaking to some Bournemouth fans over the last few weeks about him when the Edwards stuff began, they didn't seem all that caught up that he was leaving. And a lot of them were saying he hasn't really been involved in our recruitment since the new owners came in. They brought in their own people. They've hired an outside consultancy firm, and they're using certain analytics people that they have working for them separate to Bournemouth. So, but again, that might just be them downplaying his impact because they're losing it. So it's very hard to know. Like you said, the technical director role is not the sporting director role and has a different mandate. It's more about processes, linking departments, communication across the board, narrowing, funneling the noise so that what the manager gets is purely the information he needs, rather than having everybody sort of going to the manager. They go through Hughes, and Hughes then lets the manager know what the manager needs to know. Also keeps the manager from delving too far into certain departments and meddling. So, look, Michael Edwards rates the guy very highly. And when Edwards was appointed, I said that whatever he wants to do, I'm on board with, because I have that level of faith in Michael Edwards. And we know what Michael Edwards can do because we saw him do it at Liverpool. But we might as well go through some of the players that landed at Bournemouth while Hughes was there. So we can go back and go through them season by season. That first year, when he was working in the recruitment department, they signed Dan Gosling, Junior Stanislas, Callum Wilson, and Andrew Sermon. Gosling was very talented, but a lot of injuries. But Callum Wilson is the real sort of standout name there. Now, again, he might not have had any involvement in that. It's just one to mention. 15-16 then, they signed Tyron Mings for a substantial amount of money. He didn't really work out there, but they sold him at a big profit because he did well at Villa. Benica Phobie didn't really work out there. Lewis Graben didn't really work out there. Max Gradle didn't really work out there, and neither did Lee Tomlin. And all of them were signed for decent chunks of money. But again, it may well have been that Eddie Howe was overseeing all of it. We move on.
That was still 2015, was it?
That was 2015-16.
Yeah. So as far as I could see, when he took the technical director title, let's say, or role, was summer 2016. But it doesn't say when exactly. So it could have been like later into the year, or it could have been, let's say, after the first summer transfers were done or whatever. So definitely nothing I would say before the end of 15-16 would be within his actual remit, but it's unclear how many of the summer 2016 ones would be.
Yeah, that's very fair. And that's the summer where they signed Jordan Ibe and Brad Smith from us for 18 or 19 million combined. They signed Lewis Cook, who I think is a really good player. He's just had some horrible luck with injuries. They signed Aaron Ramsdale, who neither of us are huge fans of, but, they did make a profit when they sold him back to Sheffield United. 17-18, then we can be fairly certain he had more involvement. How much, we don't know, but he had more. So Nathan Aki for 20 million, really good signing for them, and they over doubled their money when they sold him. And a big, big favourite of yours, Asmir Begovic, arrived for the princely sum, Karl, of £10 million.
Hoping that I'll comment further on Asmir here.
I think you've commented enough on him.
Should we draw the conclusion that Richard Hughes enjoys the additions of my not favourite goalkeepers?
Yes, we should.
Or is that an Eddie Howe stylistic failing earlier in his career?
That's the thing. Like, it could be either. 2018, they signed David Brooks, Diego Rico, Jefferson Lerma, Dominic Solanke, and Chris Meffam. Now, Brooks was one we had been linked with. And we know the processes that we undertook to identify talent. And Edwards and Hughes had worked together at Portsmouth. Well, didn't work together at Portsmouth. Edwards was in the analytics department and Hughes was a player, but Hughes was highly interested in the analytics side. So maybe David Brooks is one that he was heavily involved in. Potentially Jefferson Lerma as well. The Solanke one for a time looked like a flop because he struggled greatly when he went there first, but they will make a huge profit when they sell him now. He has turned into a very good player. The Meffam one, he's an average centre-back and nothing more than that. Moving into 2019-20, Lloyd Kelly, who turned us down to go there. Jack Stacey. I'll always be annoyed at the fact that they looked at Luton, who had two right-backs, and signed the worst of the two because they could have signed James Justin. They signed Arnaut Danjuma. Philip Billing was a good signing for them. And they brought in Harry Wilson on loan, which in all likelihood was Hughes using his contacts with Edwards to get that deal done. 2021 looks like they had no money. They brought in Jack Wilshere and Ben Pearson for pennies. They signed Rodrigo Riquelme, who's now making, a bit of noise at Atletico Madrid. I don't remember him playing much, if any, games for Bournemouth, but as I look, he apparently played 19 games to them, including 16 in the league, but they were in the Championship that year, so I don't know. Cameron Carter-Vickers and Shane Long, another favourite of yours, also arriving on loan. I think this guy is just trolling you now. Of course, at this point, I should mention Eddie Howe is gone. So, given the changes in manager, they started the year with Jason Tindall, ended the year with Jonathan Woodgate. It is possible that Hughes had a lot more input in 2021, but again, they'd gone down, they had very little money to spend. 21-22, Scotty Parker is the manager. They bring in Emi Marcondes. They bring in Orion Nyland, who's not very good. Gary Cahill, who was at the end of his career, but still useful. Ryan Christie, Jamal Lowe, Robbie Brady, James Hill, Siriki Dembele, Kiefer Moore, Leif Davies, Morgan Rogers, Ethan Laird, Nat Phillips, Freddie Woodman, and Todd Cantwell all arrived on loan. Given there was no money to spend, this is when the previous owner, Maxime Denham, had basically pulled back from the club and I think was a little bit worried about being sanctioned as part of the whole ongoing thing that was around Abramovich and others, even though he was by then a British citizen. He wasn't willing to spend any more money. There's no real standout signings there. It's when they come up and when they bin off Parker in particular that the recruitment does improve drastically. But again, this is now under the new ownership and we don't know what involvement he had. But in that summer, he did sign Marcus Senesi, who's pretty good. and Marcus Tavernier, who is very talented, if a little inconsistent, and Neto on a free. In the January, they bring in Ouattara, Darren Randolph, Semenyo, and Zerbani. Pretty much all decent signings. They also signed Matthias Vigna and Hamid Traore on loan with options to buy or an obligation on Traore. It didn't work. He's now gone on loan with an option to buy to Napoli. And then finally this season, Justin Kluivert, the Traore deal made permanent. Romain Favre, who they bought and loaned to Lorient and have now brought back. Milos Kerkez, who I think is a really, really good signing. Alex Scott's a really good signing. Max Aarons is a good signing. Tyler Adams is a good signing, but obviously he's had the injuries. And they brought in Sinistera on loan, have since made that a permanent deal. They've also signed in Radu and Enos Unal on loan. There's no question the recruitment has been much improved over the last couple of years, but we don't know how much Richard Hughes has been involved in that, which were his signings, which were other people's signings. But what it is fair to say, Karl, is that he managed the drop out of the Premier League really well in terms of working through multiple managers, dealing with a very small budget, and putting together a team that got them promoted again. And that's quite impressive.
I don't need a VPN. I've got nothing to hide. This is what I used to tell myself before I hooked up with LibertyShield.com. Not only is my home internet now fully encrypted, but I can now access all the websites I want, whenever I want, and do so from absolutely anywhere. As a Liverpool fan, I love to know I can now watch every match, regardless of whether it's on UK TV or not. My Liberty Shield VPN makes sure nothing is blocked and guarantees me super fast streaming speed throughout that match. You can get connected right now with their software package, which includes a 48-hour no-obligation free trial and instant access to their apps for Apple, Android, Fire TV, PC, Mac, and Android TV. Or go a step further like I have and get one of their pre-configured VPN routers. These small but powerful devices allow you to easily connect every device in your home to VPN, making it the perfect solution for smart TVs, Mac boxes, and games consoles. Visit LibertyShield.com today and use coupon code AIVPN25 to get 25% off at checkout.
Yeah, I'd agree. I also would be surprised if he'd had no input into the players that they'd had coming in over the last sort of season and a half, 2 seasons. I think if that was the case, you'd probably look at people leaving their jobs rather than he has done. Like you said, we can't judge fully how much he has done, but I think being involved in the process is probably going to be an important part of the learning curve anyway. You know, he's still pretty young for the position that he holds as well. Presumably set up as well. It's important to have different knowledge of the processes and experience of other people coming in, and now he's suddenly working with an entirely new group. So expectations and resources are going to be different, but there's obviously going to be certain holdovers whereby you've got people above you suddenly telling you you've got different recruitment staff, you've got different levels of analysts telling you different stuff. All of that needs to be managed. You said earlier, like, to put different things in front of the manager so that they can cut through the noise and make decisions themselves. Part of that is this job as well. Like, not necessarily just going to the manager or the head coach now, but going to other people who are involved in the recruitment or the contracts or whatever it is that he's at any one moment. So I think that there's some really, really good work that he will have been involved in. I think also that even if he's not chief voice over the last, let's say, 18 months or 3-4 windows, there's got to have been a level of impact there from him to justify the title and the job that he's had.
For sure.
Whereby you would think, yeah, he must have had, a good impact, a good voice, and a good decision-making process.
Yeah, and like you said, the fact that he has been linked with other jobs, it's not just us. Like you said, he was linked with Newcastle. He was linked with Roma. He was linked with another job as well, and I can't think which it was. But he has been routinely linked with other clubs over the last couple of years. He was heavily linked to Southampton before they hired Jason Wilcox. He's definitely very highly regarded within the game. So he might not have been the final decision maker. He might not have been involved in all of the transfers that they've made over the last few years. I'd be shocked if he wasn't the one that led the charge for Alex Scott, because if I'm not mistaken, Bournemouth were linked with him for a couple of years, like pre-takeover. So he would be the link there. I would imagine he was heavily involved in that one, and likely a couple of the others as well. He's also been given a lot of credit by the owner for really pushing them towards Andoni Iraola. And it must have been tough for him, because him and Gary O'Neill would have been he was the one that pushed for Gary O'Neill. That is well known. They'd played together. They're very good friends. It must have been very tough for him to see the owners decide to part ways with Gary O'Neill, especially considering O'Neill had performed miracles really to keep them up last season. But he was the one that was clear-headed enough to really look at the bigger picture and go, right, well, who's the best we can get? Not who's the safe pair of hands, which we've seen a lot of clubs in that situation do. If they'd turn around and said, we're going to move on from Gary O'Neill, we just don't think he has the experience and the nous to keep us in the division. Let's go with a safe pair, the quote-unquote safe pair of hands, be it, I don't know, Big Sam or somebody of that dinosaur ilk. For him to be the one that was like, Andoni Iraola is the guy we need. He can be the one that changes the trajectory of this club. He can really take Bournemouth Football Club to the very next level. That's huge. And it shows a willingness to be brave, to be ambitious, and to be aggressive, because Iraola has been linked with a bunch of different clubs, probably clubs that would have paid him more than Bournemouth, clubs with, higher standing in the game than Bournemouth. And yet he was able to really lead the path on that one and get that deal done. And I mean, Iraola looks a great appointment for them. They're 13th in the league. I know Wolves are ahead of them with O'Neill, and some people are saying, oh, well, they did better. It's not the same thing. O'Neill took over a better squad at Wolves than Iraola did at Bournemouth. I think the O'Neill appointment and the Iraola appointment, I think they do. Given what we're in the situation we're in now, I do think that gives me a lot of hope for him having some involvement in the process of identifying a new manager, along with Michael Edwards.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's likely that given the pool of managers who are either available or have been widely mentioned, that discussions would have taken place first before either of these two were confirmed. I think it's, again, more likely that given the dates that the respective new additions to Liverpool can start their jobs, that it's more going to be on Edwards to come up with the decision of the new coach this time around. Mike Gordon and whoever else as well, perhaps. But like you said at the start, Hughes is going to be at Bournemouth up until the end of the season. So we need a manager, more than likely, all but arranged, even if it's not announced before that. So I don't know that he'll be hugely involved in the manager decision this time around, but it's decision making. It's not a specific one item on the task list that he's got to be good at. It's the decision making, the ability to identify traits within those head coaches and all of the rest of it, which comes with obviously the negotiations and, like you say, going in against other clubs and making sure that you present the best case and so on and so forth. All of these things are the transferable skills we'll be looking for.
Yeah, and I'd also imagine that Edwards will be keeping him in the loop on any and all decisions around personnel between now and the end of the season, because I don't think Edwards is just going to make decisions and then go to Hughes, right, by the way, this is who you're working with. I think he will have some input. Edwards is going to be the lead decision maker on everything. He's going to be the lead decision maker on recruitment of players and staff. That's his mandate. Hughes will be will be working to guidance from Michael Edwards. He will have a huge input, obviously, but in the same way that Mike Gordon had the final say on things for many years, Edwards will now have the final say. Hughes's backstory is really interesting. So his parents were living in Scotland. His dad worked for Penguin Books, who we all will have benefited from over the years. But his mother flew back to Glasgow just to give birth to him, and then he moved to Italy, where he lived until he was 14. And he spent some time in the Atalanta Academy before his family moved back to England, which is when he joined the Arsenal Academy. But he grew up speaking Italian and is fluent to this day and is, by all accounts, obsessed with Italian football, which might point towards Hamid Traore being another one of his. Now, I think he could have been a great signing. It's just that Iraola didn't seem keen on him. Maybe his defensive work rate wasn't up to scratch or whatever the situation was. But I do wonder if that might see us start to explore the Italian market a bit more. It's also well known that Hughes has a great list of contacts and is very popular within the game. So again, that might make things a lot easier. Edwards is known to be a little bit confrontational, a little bit abrasive, and not the most popular with certain clubs because of different dealings that we had over the years. So maybe there's relationships with clubs that we haven't necessarily had that we can now have because of Richard Hughes, and the balance between him and Edwards should be quite good. You're right when you say Edwards will be the decision maker on this one, and that decision, should happen in the next month, really, and that manager should be agreed upon, if not appointed. But the hope here will be that both Edwards and Hughes won't just oversee one manager, that they will outlast the next manager, regardless of how long they're at the club, because the structure is what should be there long term. And let's be honest, Richard Hughes, at 44 years of age, to be a sporting director at Liverpool, he has reached the highest point in the game. The only kind of role after that is the role like Edwards has now. So he might look at this as his destination job, and he might be happy to be at the club for the next, 10, 15, 20 years, if all goes well. So he will likely have to be involved more heavily in future appointments of managers, and he'll also be very heavily involved in appointments of other departments, because I would imagine it's not just Jurgen and the coaching staff leaving. It wouldn't surprise me if some of the sports scientists left. It wouldn't surprise me if Kornmeier leaves. If Noma, the woman who's head of nutrition, she might go because she was a Jurgen appointee. Like, they might all decide to go with Jurgen. So Hughes is going to have to be the one that goes out and replaces a lot of these people as well, or, is heavily responsible for replacing them.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, there's going to be a turnover of staff anyway, because incoming managers usually want to bring some of their own with them, whether that's coaches or supplementary staff or whatever. So there will be change in structure, there will be change in personnel, and that's all fine. We are going to a completely new era, really, with Liverpool. It's only really this playing squad, which we would hope would largely remain the same in terms of we're already built in many positions for the next few years. But even there, we know we'll get change. I think what would be interesting to watch from Hughes' perspective is his progression and how much maybe responsibility or authority maybe he has over the coming years, because part of Edwards coming back obviously is going to be to basically identify a second club, isn't it? It's going to be about him maybe eventually building for FSG a second team. However that is utilised from a Liverpool perspective, if at all. I think once that is wheels in motion, then we'll probably see Hughes having to do a lot more top decision making for Liverpool specifically.
Yeah, and the wheels are very clearly already in motion for us with regards to this second club. We've seen that FSG are working on a move to bring in Pedro Marquez, who's the technical director at Benfica, to be part of the new setup. And in all likelihood, he might be the guy, given the sporting director role, at the second club, with Edwards overseeing both him and Hughes. And that's, we might see some shuffling of the decks. We might see, there's been talk of Liverpool looking to bring in the chief scout from Bournemouth. And maybe it's a case where Barry Hunter is moved across into a role with FSG to be involved in the second club. So we might see some changing of the guard there as well. There will definitely be a sharing of some resources, but there might be some people who maybe are working at Liverpool and kind of feel like they've hit the wall in terms of what they can do at Liverpool, but maybe a fresh start at this second club where there's going to be a lot of building to do in terms of the structure and the infrastructure. Maybe that can be a new task for some of them. So it's quite exciting. And I don't know what you're feeling on it. We haven't really talked about it. What is your thoughts on Liverpool on FSG acquiring a second club and Liverpool becoming part of the multi-club model?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I think it's an avenue we should have explored earlier, arguably. I don't like certain ways of doing it. I don't like the, should we say, farming of dozens and dozens of players who don't really get a career pathway. But I think for Liverpool and a second team, it makes absolute sense, depending on where that is and if any direct relationship there is. I've often kind of felt, even more than minor European leagues, maybe taking a South American, let's say, club, may be a better way to go for us, especially now given different, which in turn makes it easier, rules on attaining work permits and so on for people, which you basically couldn't do for younger South American players earlier on. So I'm fine with it in principle. I'm not, like I say, I'm not a big fan of just hampering players' career progression just in case one day they are good enough for your main club, let's say. Yeah. And like the supporters of every single other club on the planet, my thoughts are selfish towards Liverpool because that's my club. So yeah, I'm fine with it, but I understand some clubs would not necessarily want to be, wouldn't want to be the second team or wouldn't want to be the second thought, let's say. So I can see the fors and against it, but I do think it would work fine for Liverpool in principle. To be honest, my biggest thing about this last couple of weeks is I'm really glad at the order things have been done. We've spoken about this so many times. This had to be the order. You start at the top, and that top person gets to pick his next in command. And that person and those ones above him and around him then get to pick who the manager is, the head coaches. All the rest of the structure comes from the top. Otherwise, it's a muddle, it's a power struggle, it's just nonsense.
It's the tail wagging the dog. And unfortunately, that kind of had become what was happening at Liverpool over the last couple of years. But because of how we've done this, we've gone with the biggest appointment in terms of, the structure, which is the guy who's overseeing everything. Edwards first, then your sporting director, and then your head coach. And that should be your chain of command. Fair enough, Jurgen is a very special case and you want to give him more leeway than you would with certain other managers. But the sporting director should unquestionably sit, even if it's just slightly above, should sit above the manager. And the manager should be answering to that sporting director. On the multi-club thing, people always give the examples of the bad ones. So Laurent are not having a particularly great season and people are saying, it's not working with the Bournemouth thing. But there's other factors at play there. The Strasbourg-Chelsea thing is a mess. Clearly Strasbourg were bought probably as a way around FFP for Chelsea so they continue to buy players and just shove them there. And there's never going to be a real connection between those players and Strasbourg because for all intents and purposes, they're being bought by Chelsea. There's the Red Bull thing where two clubs were just bought and, rebranded. There's the City Football Group. The City Football Group, to their credit, have managed to have a lot of success across the board, not just with Man City, but with a lot of their other clubs as well. Now, some of those clubs got rebranded to be, like Melbourne City, for example, was Melbourne Heart. They were rebranded to be, Man City of Australia, the same at Mumbai City, some of these other clubs. But other clubs they've just taken into their portfolio and they've just kept working with them to develop them as their own entity. But, nobody ever mentions the clubs where it's working well. So, for example, the Aston Villa owners also own Vitória Guimarães. No one mentions that that's worked out really well for both clubs because there's been so little crossover between them. But there's a sharing of ideas and there's a trialing of certain processes that they are capable now of doing with Vitória before implementing them at Villa, where, the room for error is smaller at the high end of the Premier League than it is at the middle, the high middle of Portugal. There's plenty of clubs that are owned by people who own other clubs, and the fans are more than happy. And I'm like you, I like the idea of a South American club, whether it's an Argentinian club, a Brazilian club, which FSG have been linked with before to multiple Brazilian clubs, or, a club in Uruguay, perhaps, and using that as a base of operations for South America, where we can start to really put out a wider scope of scouting and look to get really high-end young players at 16, 17 in there, develop them from there, and then shift them on. But their place in the footballing food chain is not changing. Just because they're now linked to Liverpool, they're not going to be all of a sudden, they go from big brother to little brother. They're a little brother anyway. This is what gets me, is that you see people say, oh, well, the only purpose of, Club X owning Club Y is to buy players off them. If they're buying them at fair market value, there isn't really an issue there.
Hey guys, it's Eddie Gibbs from Anfield Index here. I hope you're enjoying this podcast, and I'm sorry to call time on the show before it ends. In the current climate, it's tougher than ever before to offer podcasts for free. At Anfield Index, we produce over 75 free shows every month, which I'm confident is unparalleled in the LFC sphere. Whilst we'd love to offer everything for free, the production costs now make this impossible. That said, we don't want to follow the model of other channels and lock all of our content behind a paywall. So what we've decided to do is to continue offering every show for free, but cut that offering to 30 minutes on our longer shows. So to get all of our shows in full and enjoy the best of everything we have to offer, we really hope you'll consider supporting the channel and signing up at AnfieldIndexPro.com. For about the price of 1 cup of coffee, you'll get every podcast in full with 0 ads. You'll also get access to our LFC VIP community, where you can enjoy live podcasts, engage with our podcasters, and chat with other Reds in real time. So that website again, AnfieldIndexPro.com. Join today.
Sports Social Podcast Network.